Title, Same Uniform, Different Treatment. Part 1, Cleared for Takeoff. Elijah. Eli. Matthews was used to early mornings. The quiet of a terminal before it filled with travelers, the steady rhythm of checklists, the scent of coffee and jet fuel. It all grounded him. He was a commercial pilot, not just any pilot, a damn good one. 10 years in the Air Force, 8 in the private sector. Calm in turbulence, sharp under pressure, and he was one of the very few black commercial airline captains in the country. But this morning felt different, not because of the flight plan, because of the eyes watching him. Eli had passed through Terminal C at Atlanta Hartsfield more times than he could count. He knew every TSA agent by face, if not by name. Most nodded at him with respect. But today there was a new face at the checkpoint, a young white officer, early 20s, clean shave, rigid posture. He looked Eli up and down with the kind of stare Eli had learned to recognize a long time ago. Not curiosity, not professionalism, suspicion. "Step over here, sir," the officer said flatly. Eli blinked. "I'm flight crew," he replied calmly, holding out his ID badge. "I know. Step over here." Eli was pulled to the side. His bag, identical to the one his white co-pilot had just passed through with, was taken aside. The co-pilot, Brent, turned around confused. "He's with me," he said. The officer ignored him. "Remove your shoes, belt, and watch," the officer demanded. "Excuse me?" Eli raised an eyebrow. "I'm a cleared captain. I'm not a passenger." "Standard random procedure." "Random," Eli said, voice tightening. The officer didn't respond. 10 feet away, Brent breezed through without even taking off his jacket. Eli stood in socks on the cold floor while a second officer patted him down and rifled through his bag. Inside was his logbook, his epaulets, his copy of Weather Flying, and his lunch. Nothing suspicious, nothing out of place. But they searched like they were looking for something, anything to justify the delay. When it was over, Eli quietly gathered his things, nodded politely, and walked through. Brent caught up with him near gate 28. "What the hell was that?" Brent asked. Eli didn't answer at first. Then softly, "That wasn't random." As they went through pre-flight checks, Brent kept looking at him. "Seriously, man, that was messed up. Want me to say something?" "To who?" "Your union rep, TSA." "The company?" Eli sighed. "I've been through worse. I'm used to it." Brent looked at him hard. "That's not okay, Eli." Eli met his gaze. "It's not, but it's real." They flew from Atlanta to Denver without incident. Clear skies, smooth takeoff, perfect landing. Passengers clapped as usual when they touched down. But Eli wasn't smiling. In the captain's lounge, another black pilot, Malik Jefferson, caught his eye. "You good?" Malik asked. Eli hesitated, then told him what happened. Malik's face darkened. "Again?" "You too?" Eli asked. Malik nodded. "Happened to me last month. Different airport, same stare." They sat in silence for a while. Then Malik said something that stuck. "You either let it go, or you light a fuse." That night Eli couldn't sleep. He pulled out his flight journal and started writing. Not about weather patterns or fuel reports, but about what it felt like to be profiled at the job he loved. About wearing wings and still being treated like a threat. Then for the first time, he did something he had never done before. He hit post on a public letter titled, "What It's Like to Be a Black Pilot in America." He expected maybe a few comments. He didn't expect a storm. By morning, his letter had over 40,000 shares. Pilots across the country, black, Latino, Asian, even some white, commented, "This happened to me too. Thank you for saying this. I didn't know, now I do." One flight attendant wrote, "I've seen it happen. I didn't speak up. I will now." A major aviation blog picked it up. Then CNN called. 2 days later, Eli received a carefully worded email from the head of crew relations at his airline. "Captain Matthews, we appreciate your feedback. Please know we take these matters seriously. Would you be available for a meeting to discuss your concerns?" It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. He sat across from 2 executives in a beige conference room. They looked uncomfortable. "We've reviewed TSA's procedures," one said. Eli cut in. "This isn't just about TSA. It's about what happens after. It's about what your company does or doesn't do when your pilots get treated like suspects. The room was silent. Then Eli added, "You don't just need to change protocol. You need to change culture." Not everyone supported him. A few pilots grumbled that he was making trouble. Someone anonymously emailed him saying, "Stop whining. You're lucky to even have the job." Another posted on a forum, "Can't we just fly and leave race out of it?" But for every one of them, there were 10 more who said, "It's time." Eli was invited to speak on a national aviation podcast. He told his story, calmly, clearly, with precision and pain. A female host said, "You sound like someone who's been holding this in for years." Eli nodded. "I have." One evening, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was from Captain Dorothy Fields, one of the first black women to fly for a major airline. "I read your letter. I was called sweetheart and pulled over for random checks for years. You're not alone, and you're not done. Keep going." Eli read it 3 times, then whispered to himself, "I won't stop." Part 2. Turbulence Ahead. The world didn't change overnight, but something had shifted. Captain Eli Matthews was no longer just a skilled pilot. He had become a reluctant symbol, and symbols make people uncomfortable. Some called him brave, others called him dangerous. And as his post continued to go viral, Eli found himself in the one place a pilot hates most, in the middle of a storm with no clear horizon. In the weeks that followed, Eli received hundreds of messages. A pilot based in New York wrote, "I'm Korean American. Been profiled every time I go through JFK. Thought I was imagining it. You confirmed I wasn't crazy." A black female flight attendant messaged, "They always stop me in Dallas, but my white crewmates, straight through. Every time." Even an airport baggage handler emailed, "We see it too. We talk about it behind the scenes. Thank you for saying it out loud." For every message, Eli felt the weight and the responsibility. This wasn't just his story anymore, but not all reactions were supportive. In the Delta Crew Lounge, where pilots gathered before flights, Eli began to notice the subtle shift. A few white captains would lower their voices when he walked in. Some would stop talking altogether. One made a snide comment as he passed. "Guess we gotta tiptoe around Captain Twitter now." He didn't respond. He just smiled tightly, kept walking. But inside, a part of him bristled. Why is it that when you speak up, people treat you like the problem, not the thing you're speaking about? Eli received a formal email from the airline's legal department politely requesting that he not publicly associate the company name with any statements unless cleared through PR. It wasn't a direct gag order, but it was close. Vega, an old friend from his Air Force days and now a civil rights lawyer, told him, "They're trying to protect their brand, not their pilots. So what do I do?" "You decide what matters more, the brand or the people under it." The pilots' union called a meeting. Eli was invited to speak. He walked into the room nervous but focused. Around him sat dozens of pilots, a sea of epaulets, coffee cups, and crossed arms. He cleared his throat. "I'm not here to burn anything down. I love this job. I love the sky. But I shouldn't have to choose between flying and dignity. You wouldn't accept being treated like a threat just for showing up in uniform. Neither should I." There was silence. Then one pilot, a white woman from Miami, clapped. Then another. Eventually, the room gave a standing ovation. But in the back row, one man didn't move. Eli caught his glare. It was a warning. Then came Chicago O'Hare. Eli was passing through TSA again. His co-pilot, another white man, went through with a nod and a, "Have a good flight, sir." Eli pulled aside again. Same routine. Different officer. Different city. Same message. This time someone filmed it. The video was short, less than 30 seconds, but showed Eli standing in socks, arms out, while a TSA agent rifled through his pilot bag like it held weapons. The clip went viral overnight. Pilot profiled at O'Hare. Flight captain or suspect? Why are black professionals still being treated like criminals? The comments exploded. Some praised him. Others accused him of playing the race card. But the truth was undeniable. After the second video, other pilots started speaking out. a Jamaican-born captain from Boston, shared a story about being forced to strip in a random search. A Latina pilot said she was once asked if she was really with the crew. An Arab-American first officer recalled being pulled into a back room so often, his flight had to be delayed. Eli hadn't planned to be a leader, but now he had to be. Under growing pressure, Eli's airline finally released a statement. "We are committed to equity and inclusion. We take all reports of discrimination seriously and are reviewing our internal policies to better support our crew members." It was better than nothing, but it was also vague, and Eli wasn't interested in vagueness anymore. A week later, Eli was invited to speak at the company's headquarters, this time not just to HR, but to the CEO himself. He sat in a polished boardroom with a view of the runway. The CEO, a gray-haired man with aviator sunglasses on the table in front of him, looked Eli in the eye. "Captain Matthews, you've made quite the impact." Eli didn't flinch. "That wasn't the goal. The goal was to be able to walk through the same doors my colleagues do, without fear. The goal was to be treated like a professional, not a suspect. The goal is fairness. That's it." The CEO nodded slowly, then said, "We're ready to make changes, but we want you at the table." By the end of the month, Eli was appointed to lead the Crew Equity Task Force, a new internal committee responsible for reviewing TSA interactions, creating a reporting system for discriminatory incidents, partnering with airports on pilot identification protocols, training TSA liaisons on bias awareness. It wasn't just a win, it was a start. One morning, Eli received a handwritten letter. No return address. Inside, Captain Matthews, "I'm 15. I want to be a pilot one day. I didn't think someone who looked like me could fly, but now I do. Thank you." Eli held, then folded it gently and placed it next to the checklist, because from now on, this was part of his mission too. Part 3. Inside the Cockpit of Change. The Crew Equity Task Force sounded powerful on paper. It wasn't, at least not yet. Eli showed up to the first meeting expecting urgency, commitment, a sense of moral weight. Instead, he found a dozen people, most of them from HR, sipping coffee, reviewing agenda packets like it was just another Tuesday. One executive smiled and said, "Let's keep this brief." Eli sat down slowly, eyes scanning the room. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. The meeting began with polite suggestions. "Let's send a memo to all airport security teams. Maybe we can include some bias awareness slides in annual training. We'll design a feedback form for crew complaints." Eli raised his hand. "Let's start with the real problem," he said. The room went quiet. "The problem isn't forms, it's fear. We're afraid to hold partners accountable, especially federal ones like TSA. We're afraid to admit we've been silent too long, and we're afraid of what happens when we prioritize people over PR." One of the HR reps cleared her throat. "We do care, Captain Matthews." "Then prove it," Eli replied. "Don't protect the company. Protect the people who wear your logo." As word of the task force spread, support came from unexpected places. At JFK, a black baggage handler stopped Eli as he walked toward his gate. "You're the pilot, right? The one from the news?" Eli nodded. The man grinned. "My daughter's in flight school now. She says you made her believe she belongs up there." Then he added, "Don't let them bury this. Don't let them wear you down." Eli gripped his shoulder. "I won't." Back in the air, Eli noticed a shift. Some colleagues supported him openly. Others, not so much. On one flight to Phoenix, the first officer barely spoke to him, did the checklist, nodded, and kept his eyes on the panel. After landing, the man muttered, "You pilots used to just fly planes. Now it's always politics." Eli smiled without smiling. "No, we just used to stay silent. Big difference." The task force launched its first initiative, bias and inclusion awareness training for all company employees. Mandatory for pilots, optional for TSA liaisons. Eli led the first session. He opened with a question. "How many of you have ever been pulled aside at security just for looking different?" A few hands. "How many of you assumed a black or brown crew member was in the wrong uniform?" More hands. He didn't shame. He didn't accuse. He just told his story. Again. And watch walls start to crack. After one session, a white captain, gruff, late 50s, former Navy, approached Eli. I used to think this was all noise, the man said. But then I remembered something. 20 years ago, I saw a black flight attendant get stopped 3 times at Denver. I said nothing. He looked Eli in the eye. I'm not proud of that, but I'll speak up now. Eli didn't say anything. He just nodded. That moment, one crack in the armor, meant everything. Then came the article. A popular aviation blog published a post titled, "Woke in the Sky, Are Pilots Being Forced to Choose Politics Over Precision?" The comments were brutal. If he can't handle TSA, how can he handle a cockpit? This guy's trying to be a celebrity. Fly the damn plane and shut up. Eli's inbox flooded with hate mail, threats, slurs. One message said, "You're ruining this profession. Get out before someone makes you." He forwarded it to legal, then deleted the rest. But that night he sat in his hotel room, lights off, wondering, was it worth it? Captain Dorothy Fields, and the aviation legend who had messaged him months ago, showed up at one of his speaking events. She was smaller than he imagined. Quiet, composed, with steel in her eyes. Afterward, they sat in the back of the empty auditorium. "You okay?" she asked. Eli nodded, then paused. "Sometimes I think I'm pushing too hard." Dorothy leaned forward. "You think they let me fly in the 80s because they were enlightened?" She smiled. "They let me fly because I refused to give up the controls. And so will you." Then came a moment no one expected. An email from TSA headquarters. "Captain Matthews, we've reviewed your recent task force initiatives. TSA leadership is open to collaborating on a pilot-specific clearance program to reduce unnecessary stops and improve crew dignity while maintaining security. Let's meet." Eli read it 3 times, then texted Vega. The system blinked. 1 month later, the first draft was in place. Crew DAP, a collaboration between the airline, TSA, and pilot unions to recognize crew ID more consistently, eliminate redundant pat-downs for cleared flight staff, address profiling complaints directly with TSA reps, establish accountability logs at major terminals. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Eli received another letter in the mail, this one from a retired pilot named Harold, a white man from Texas. "Captain Matthews, I flew 40 years, thought I'd seen everything. But you made me see what I'd ignored. It's not easy to challenge a system that signs your checks, but you did, and for that, you've earned your wings twice." Eli sat in his hotel room that night, watching planes take off into the dark sky, and for the first time in months, he felt something return to his chest. Peace, not because it was over, but because it had finally begun. Part 4. Altitude Adjustment. The Crew Dignity Access Program launched quietly. No press conference, no photo ops, just a quiet internal rollout across 3 major airports, Atlanta, Chicago, and LAX, with plans to expand if it proved successful. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Crew IDs were being recognized. Pat-downs were down. Complaints dropped significantly. And for the first time in months, Eli walked through security at Hartsfield without being stopped. He didn't expect it to feel so strange. The TSA agent scanned his badge, smiled, and said, "Good morning, Captain Matthews." No second glance, no detour to the side, no silent judgment, just a nod of respect. Eli kept walking, but halfway down the terminal, he stopped, turned around, and looked back at the checkpoint. It was the first time in years that walking through security hadn't felt like a test. Back in the pilot lounge, several younger crew members approached him. "You're the reason we're not getting stopped anymore," one said. A new flight attendant added, "We just flew through O'Hare. No extra checks. First time that's ever happened for me?" Eli nodded. "It's not just me," he said. "It's all of us. Every story, every step forward." A small but respected aviation magazine ran a feature titled, "Changing Course: How One Pilot Sparked Policy Reform Across America's Airports." They interviewed Eli, published photos of him in uniform, and printed excerpts of his original open letter. The final quote read, "Sometimes the hardest part isn't speaking up, it's continuing to speak after people stop clapping." Captain Shearer, Elijah Matthews. But even as the change spread, Eli felt something inside him fray. Flying wasn't the escape it used to be. He caught himself watching clouds not with wonder, but with weariness. pre-flight briefings felt heavier. Every gate agent, every captain who looked at him differently, it all stacked up. His logbook was full. So was his mind. Eli called his sister, Vanessa, a therapist and the only person who never treated him like a headline. "I'm tired," he said. "You've been carrying a movement, Eli." "I didn't mean to." "You carried it anyway." She paused. "When's the last time you flew just for you? No pressure, no press, no reform work, just joy?" Eli couldn't remember. For the first time in over a decade, Eli took a 2-week leave from flying. No one questioned it. The company said, "You've earned it." He booked a cabin in Asheville. No cell signal, no airport buzz, just mountains, coffee, and quiet. There in the silence, he opened his old logbook, the one he started in the Air Force, and flipped through. Page after page, mission after mission. And then he found the page where he first wrote, "Remember, flight is freedom. Never let them steal that." He closed the book and exhaled. When he returned to the city, a message was waiting. It was from the CEO. "Eli, I want to personally thank you. The DAP program has improved morale across the board, especially among minority crew members. We've received inquiries from other airlines looking to adopt the model. I'd like to discuss expanding your role. Let's talk." Eli returned to the task force, this time as its official executive liaison. His job? Oversee program rollout to 15 more airports, coordinate with TSA on training curriculum, create a safe reporting system for discrimination, mentor new pilots of color entering the airline. It wasn't just reform now, it was infrastructure, permanent, protected, scalable. At a crew event in Dallas, a young black pilot named Jordan introduced himself. "Captain Matthews, sir, I just got my wings last month. You're the reason I didn't give up in flight school." Eli smiled. "How's the job treating you?" Jordan laughed. "Honestly, better than I expected. I didn't think I'd feel safe in this uniform. But I do." Then he paused. "I hope you keep flying." That sentence hit Eli harder than expected, because for a while, he wasn't sure if he would. Eli returned to the skies slowly. First short domestic runs, then cross-country hauls. And one morning, as he flew over the Rockies, he looked out at the snow-covered peaks and felt something return. Not glory, not purpose. Peace. The cockpit wasn't just a workplace again. It was his place, his sky, his breath. In his locker at the airport, Eli found a sticky note taped to the door. No name, just handwriting that read, "You made it better," quietly, firmly, unshakably. "Some of us saw you, all of us benefited." Eli folded the note and put it in his wallet, right next to his airline ID. And as he walked toward his next flight, duffel over his shoulder, shoulders square, uniform crisp, he felt lighter. Not because the journey was over, but because it was finally taking off. Part 5. Cleared for Influence. 6 months had passed since the launch of the Crew Dignity Access Program. Airports across the country were rolling it out. TSA liaisons were undergoing new training. Minority crew members were reporting fewer incidents. The skies weren't perfect, but they were shifting. And at the center of it, still flying, still steady, was Captain Elijah Matthews. Eli had never liked cameras, but now they kept showing up. He appeared on Good Morning America. He gave a TED Talk titled "High Altitudes, Low Expectations, Flying While Black." His face was on the cover of Aviation Today with the headline, "Pilot, Advocate, Changemaker." With visibility came invitations. Harvard Kennedy School invited him to speak. The FAA reached out to discuss diversity in aviation. The Congressional Transportation Committee sent a formal request for testimony. Eli wasn't chasing fame, but he knew. This was the moment to move the needle. The hearing room in D.C. was packed. Lawmakers, journalists, lobbyists. Eli adjusted his tie. Not a uniform today, but a sharp gray suit with silver cufflinks gifted by a former Air Force commander. He took the seat at the witness table. The chairman looked over his glasses. "Captain Matthews, we appreciate you being here today." Eli cleared his throat, then spoke. "I've flown for over 15 years. I've worn this country's uniform. I've trained new pilots, calmed passengers through storms, and landed aircraft in conditions most would call impossible. but nothing has tested me more than walking through an airport in my own skin. The room went silent. I'm not here for pity. I'm here for policy, and I'm asking you not to reward me for surviving injustice, but to help make sure no one else has to. Not everyone clapped. One lawmaker, clearly irritated, asked, "Are you saying the entire TSA system is racist?" Eli replied, "I'm saying implicit bias exists everywhere, and when it's left unchecked, it becomes policy without ever needing to be written down." Another accused him of dividing the industry. Eli responded, "You can't divide something that was never united. I'm trying to build unity, but you can't build until you level the uneven ground." After the hearing, Eli received an unexpected call. A major rival airline wanted him. They offered a senior pilot position, a consulting role in DEI initiatives, a six-figure bonus, and complete creative freedom. "You'll have real authority here," the executive promised, "and fewer headaches." Eli paused, then asked, "Why now?" The exec said, "Because we want your name on our progress." Eli smiled politely and declined. He returned to his current airline. Why? Because they had let him fight. Because he helped build the change from scratch. And because the flight crews, the people in the trenches, still needed someone they could trust on the inside. "I'm not done here," he told Vega. "We're just reaching cruising altitude." One morning he prepped for a flight to Seattle. Routine route, full crew. But at the gate he was approached by a family of four. The father, a black man in his 40s, had tears in his eyes. "Captain Matthews," he said, "this is my son Jordan. He's 9. He wants to be a pilot." Jordan smiled wide-eyed. "He's learning about you at school. You're in his social studies textbook." Eli knelt beside the boy. "You love planes?" "Yes, sir." "You gonna fly one someday?" Jordan nodded. "Then I'll be in the front row of your first flight," Eli grinned. That same week, the FAA released a new policy. All U.S. commercial airports must implement uniform crew clearance procedures by 2026. Inspired directly by Eli's work, the Washington Post headline read, "Pilots Push for Equality Takes Flight Nationwide." To celebrate the milestone, Eli wrote a memo to all crew. "Team, progress isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quicker check-in. Sometimes it's not being pulled aside. Sometimes it's a little boy realizing the cockpit could belong to him. Thank you for standing with me, and sometimes carrying me, through the turbulence. We fly better now. Together." Captain E. Matthews. One night, Eli walked through an empty terminal after hours. No passengers, no announcements, just silence. He paused at a window. Outside, a 737 taxied across the tarmac under moonlight. He watched it, hand resting on the glass. He whispered to himself, "They tried to ground me. I became the runway." Part 6. The Altitude of Accountability. Eli was no longer just a name in the cockpit. He was on magazine covers, conference stages, even classroom walls. Everywhere he went, airports, coffee shops, even bookstores, someone would say, "You're that pilot," and he'd smile politely, shake a hand, take a picture. But the higher he climbed in public consciousness, the more turbulence began to build beneath him. A progressive senator from Georgia invited Eli to speak at a national forum on racial equity in federal agencies. He wasn't sure at first. "I'm not a politician," Eli told her. "You're more than one," she replied. "You're living proof." He agreed. At the event, he spoke about TSA, federal oversight, and the power of storytelling. This isn't about blame. It's about reflection. If America wants to fly forward, we have to stop ignoring the drag beneath our wings. The speech went viral. Some called it beautiful. Others, political poison. Right-wing commentators took notice. A viral clip twisted his words into a headline. "Pilot claims America is racist. Should he still be flying?" Conservative blogs questioned his loyalty to the country, accused him of woke activism. One article called him a DEI pawn in a captain's uniform. It got worse. A fake screenshot circulated online. A post supposedly from Eli's social media saying, "All cops are dangerous, period." He never wrote it, but that didn't stop the outrage. Within days, the airline launched an internal review. Publicly, they said, "We take allegations against any of our employees seriously, and will investigate accordingly. Privately, they called Eli and said, "We don't believe this is real, but we have to follow protocol." Eli understood, but it still felt like betrayal. For the first time in months, Eli felt alone. Not because people didn't care, but because they didn't know what to say anymore. Brent, his longtime co-pilot, called him. "You okay?" "I don't know," Eli admitted. "You want me to say something publicly?" "No," Eli said. "Just keep flying with me. That's enough." At an aviation camp for underrepresented youth in Atlanta, students organized a support rally. They held handmade signs, "We stand with Captain Eli. Truth flies higher." "He opened the gate for us." Videos from the rally flooded social media. A young girl said to the camera, "They can't take back what he's already built. We won't let them." After 3 weeks, the airline's tech forensics team confirmed the screenshot was fake. The post never existed. The image was AI generated. Eli was cleared of all allegations. The company released a formal statement. "Captain Matthews is a valued member of our team. We apologize for the unnecessary distress caused during the investigation." At a press conference, Eli kept it brief. "I won't lie. It hurt. Not just the smear, but the fact that even truth has to prove itself these days. But I didn't come this far to get shaken by shadows. So I'll keep flying. I'll keep showing up. Because silence doesn't keep planes in the air. Courage does." Weeks later, the FAA officially appointed Eli to its Advisory Council on Equity and Innovation, the first pilot of color in that role. His first mission, draft a nationwide model for TSA crew coordination and bias training. He accepted with humility. But privately, he wrote in his journal, "The sky never asked what color I was. It just waited to see if I could fly." At Atlanta Hartsfield, a new mural was unveiled in Concourse A. It depicted a cockpit, an open runway, a young black boy reaching up toward a plane, and in the sky, the outline of Captain Eli's wings. Underneath it read, "Because of him, the gate is open." Eli attended the ceremony quietly, sunglasses on, standing in the back. When the crowd cleared, he walked up to it alone, ran his fingers across the painted sky, and whispered, "We're still flying." Part 7. Wings for the Future. Captain Eli Matthews had spent the last year pushing boundaries of policy, perception, and personal strength, but nothing prepared him for what came next. Not more headlines, not more praise, but legacy. Because now young people weren't just inspired by Eli's story, they were signing up to follow it. A regional flight school in Georgia reached out with a proposition. "Captain Matthews, we want to launch a scholarship fund in your name for students of color pursuing aviation." Eli was stunned. He wasn't dead. He wasn't retired. He was still flying. But now, he was also a symbol. It started small, 5 students, full tuition for ground school and flight training. But within 2 months, donors lined up. By the end of the quarter, the fund could support 20 students per year, with room to grow. At the launch ceremony, Eli stood on stage with the first 5 recipients. He looked at the crowd and said, "They told me the sky was the limit. What they didn't say was, some of us were never given the map to get there. Now we're handing out maps and building runways." After the ceremony, a teenage girl named Alani approached him. She was the youngest of the 5 recipients, just 16. "Captain Matthews," she said, "I used to think the cockpit was just for people on TV. Now I know it can be for people like me." Eli knelt to meet her eyes. "It already is," he said. "You're not following me. You're flying with me." Back in the air, Eli found peace again. He flew routes from New York to LA, Miami to Seattle. And everywhere he went, there was a story. A gate agent whispering, "Thanks for standing up." A father saying, "My son watches every interview of yours." A black TSA agent nodding silently as Eli passed. A nod full of meaning. The world hadn't changed completely, but the silence had cracked. And in those cracks, voices were growing. Brent, his old friend and co-pilot, nudged him during pre-flight checks. "You've been quiet," Brent said. "I'm always quiet before long hauls," Eli replied. "No, I mean, different quiet. You okay?" Eli smiled. "Just thinking about how far we've come and how far we still need to go." Brent grinned. "You sound like a TED Talk." "I was one, remember?" God, don't remind me. They both laughed. A rare, real laugh. The kind that only comes when two people have flown through storms and made it back. Back in D.C., the FAA finalized the Crew Equity Standards Act, influenced directly by Eli's task force work. It would require crew-specific TSA liaisons at every major airport, create bias reporting tools integrated with ID scanning systems, mandate annual oversight from an independent civilian committee. Eli was invited to stand beside the Secretary of Transportation during the bill's announcement. He declined the spotlight, but he helped write the final language, and that, to him, meant more than the cameras. The airline's crew department called him into a meeting. No agenda, no warning, just a room filled with flight attendants, pilots, ground crew, and even executives. On the table sat a sleek mahogany box. Inside, a custom pair of platinum pilot wings, engraved with the words, "For taking us higher." Eli stared at them, then looked up. He couldn't speak, so instead, he simply placed the wings over his heart and nodded. Later that week, Eli visited his parents in North Carolina. His father, a retired Air Force mechanic, met him on the porch. "You still flying?" he asked. "Still flying," Eli said. His father handed him an old photo, the two of them in front of a decommissioned fighter jet. "You made it further than I ever did," the old man said. Eli smiled. "Only because you pushed me to the runway." Eli still received mail, not fan mail, gratitude letters. One from a teenage boy in Detroit. "I didn't know pilots could look like me until I saw you." One from a white mother in Nebraska. "Thank you for teaching my son something I couldn't. How to be strong without being cruel." And one unsigned that read, "You didn't just open a door, you took the hinges off." One evening, as Eli piloted a red-eye from San Diego to Atlanta, cruising at 38,000 feet, he looked out at the stars. The world was quiet, his co-pilot asleep, the hum of the engine steady. And in that moment, he felt it again. Not pressure, not duty, not fatigue. Joy. Pure, weightless joy. Because no matter what they said, no matter what they tried to take from him, he was still flying. And he always would. Part 8. The National Flight Plan. Eli had been many things in his life: airman, pilot, mentor, disruptor, builder. Now he was being asked to be something more. A policymaker. It came as a formal letter. Heavy envelope. Presidential seal. Inside, Captain Matthews. "We would be honored to welcome you to the Office of Aviation Safety and Civil Rights as a senior advisor. Your work has inspired tangible reform and ignited national conversation. We believe your insight can shape the future of federal aviation standards." The Office of the President of the United States. Eli read the letter 3 times. It was everything people dreamed of: influence, impact, legacy. But it also meant leaving the cockpit, leaving the crew, leaving the sky. He called Vanessa, his sister. "I don't know if I can do both," she replied. "Maybe it's not about doing both. Maybe it's about choosing which sky you want to fly in now." His final flight, for now, was from San Francisco to Atlanta. He didn't tell passengers it was his last. Didn't want applause or fanfare. Just wanted to fly. When the plane landed, the crew surprised him with a small cake in the galley. To the captain who never just flew, but always led. "Ow." He took a bite, laughed, and said, "Best in-flight service I've ever had." His first day in D.C., Eli walked into a federal building with a badge clipped to his belt. Not his chest. Different rhythm, different tone, no flight checklist, just meetings, memos, and models. He dove in, reviewing discrimination claims from regional airports, drafting nationwide pilot inclusion benchmarks, designing outreach to underrepresented aviation students. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and it mattered. Some within the agency weren't thrilled. "He's just a pilot," one anonymous email read. "What does he know about policy?" Eli didn't respond. He just showed up. Early, prepared, respectful, relentless. Because he didn't need to out-talk them. He just had to outlast the doubt. It came unexpectedly. The voice on the other end. Familiar, confident, direct. "Eli, I read your full report. We're implementing your crew bias tracking model across all TSA facilities starting Q1 next year. Eli paused. Thank you, Mr. President. No, thank you. You took a flight path no one else could see and made it real. The first cohort of Matthews scholars graduated from the academy. Of the 20 students, 15 earned their private pilot licenses. One, Alani, was accepted into Embry-Riddle with full honors. She wrote Eli, I don't see you as a hero anymore. I see you as proof, that I can fly, that I can lead, and that I can land with grace, no matter how rough the runway. A journalist from The New Yorker sat down with him. You've gone from cockpit to Capitol. What's next? Eli smiled. I'm not chasing titles. I'm charting paths. If I do this right, the next black pilot won't have to explain why they belong. They'll just board the plane and fly. One rainy afternoon, Eli visited the mural at Atlanta Hartsfield. A young mother was standing nearby, pointing to the painting and telling her son, That's the man who helped fix the airport. The boy looked up at Eli, then at the mural, then back again. Is that you? Eli knelt, smiled and whispered, Sometimes. The boy asked, Do you still fly planes? Eli said, Not every day, but I help others learn how. The boy smiled wide. I want to fly too. That night back in D.C., Eli sat at his desk. He stared out the window as planes blinked across the dark sky. He opened his journal, the same one he'd carried for years, and wrote, I may not be in the cockpit right now, but I've never stopped flying, because real altitude isn't measured in feet, it's measured in the people who rise because you refuse to fall. Part 9. Turbulence Warning. The notification came at 3:17 a.m. Eli's phone buzzed twice, then went still. Half asleep, he reached over and squinted at the screen. Breaking. Security breach at LAX raises questions about new crew access protocols. His stomach dropped. According to initial reports, a crew member's badge had been used to gain unauthorized access to a restricted area at Los Angeles International Airport. No one was hurt. Nothing was stolen. But in the world of aviation, even a whisper of a breach sent shockwaves. And because the breach involved crew dignity access, the media instantly connected the dots and pointed them at Eli. News anchors used his name in headlines again, but not with admiration. Matthews' program under scrutiny after LAX scare. Did TSA oversight get too woke to catch real threats? Flying while black? Or flying without accountability? Eli read the headlines in silence. This wasn't backlash. This was a storm. The next morning, Eli sat in a packed federal conference room. TSA officials, FAA brass, Homeland Security reps, airline execs. The atmosphere was cold, political, defensive. One official snapped, We knew loosening screening for crew could backfire. Eli raised a hand. Nothing about DAP removes accountability. It enhances transparency. Another scoffed, Clearly not enough. Eli stood up, firm, calm, direct. A single breach doesn't prove the system is broken. It proves someone broke the rules. And that's exactly why this program matters. Because accountability is about what we do when something goes wrong, not who we blame first. The Secretary of Transportation called Eli personally. You okay? I'm holding, Eli said. Listen, we're with you. But if the political heat gets worse, Eli nodded, understanding the unsaid. If this became a scandal, he'd be asked to step down. Maybe not publicly, but quietly, with an NDA and a thank you card. Within 48 hours, the facts emerged. The badge used in the breach was stolen, not misused by actual crew. The individual bypassed standard TSA systems, not DAP-specific protocols. The real failure was at a non-compliant security gate, one that had ignored new recommendations from Eli's task force. It wasn't a DAP failure. It was a refusal to implement the very systems Eli had warned about. At a press conference, he stood before dozens of flashing cameras. Let me be clear, this incident wasn't caused by reform. It was caused by the resistance to reform. We created tools to make air travel safer and fairer, and they weren't used. But we don't run from turbulence. We fly through it, and we get stronger. Major outlets corrected their reporting. The New York Times ran a piece titled, "Blame Deflected, the LAX Breach and the Reform That Could Have Prevented It." Senator Miriam Lane went on air to say, "Captain Matthews has never shied away from accountability. He leads with clarity. That's exactly who we need in the air and on the ground." Even critics admitted Eli hadn't wavered. He had stayed the course. Days later, Eli visited LAX for an unannounced inspection. He walked the security gates with local TSA officers, quietly observing, asking questions, reviewing protocols. At the end of the walkthrough, a young black officer pulled him aside. "Sir," he said quietly, "my little brother wants to be like you. He said you're the reason he stopped being afraid of airports." Eli smiled. "Tell him we're making them safer, for him and everyone else." That night, Eli sat alone on the balcony of his DC apartment. A cup of tea, the soft hum of city traffic, planes blinking in the distance. He thought of how close it all came to collapsing, how easy it would have been to walk away, to protect his reputation, his peace, his name. But that wasn't him. He wasn't chasing comfort. He was chasing clarity. And now the world saw it too. 2 days later, a plain white envelope arrived at his office. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. In neat handwriting, it read, "They tried to clip your wings, but you taught us how to build our own." Eli folded the note and placed it beside the others, in a folder labeled simply Proof. Part 10. The Sky Remembers. The air was cool that morning in Washington, D.C. Not the kind of cold that stung, but the kind that reminded you you're alive. Captain Elijah Matthews stood in a quiet hangar, facing a crowd of crew members, officials, students, and families. He wasn't there to speak about policy or protests. He was there for something far bigger. The Federal Aviation Administration had invited him to the unveiling of a new training center in Virginia, the first of its kind focused entirely on inclusive pilot development. It would bear his name, the Elijah Matthews Center for Aviation Equity and Training. He stepped up to the podium, took a breath, and spoke. "I've spent years fighting for this, not for attention, but so you wouldn't have to fight alone. So the next black girl, the next Latino teen, the next first-gen student from a small town wouldn't question if they belong in the sky. They'll know, because we built the runway for them." Applause, standing ovation, tears. After the ceremony, Eli was approached by an elderly black man in a navy blue cap that read, "Tuskegee Airman, 1945. He shook Eli's hand, firm and steady. "I was told I wasn't fit to fly, that I'd never sit in that seat. But I did, and so did you." Eli blinked back emotion. The man added, "And now they don't have to ask permission anymore." The airline invited Eli to fly one final ceremonial flight, from Atlanta to Washington. This time, it wasn't a commercial route. It was a special charter. Every seat filled by scholarship students, young cadets, and aspiring aviators. The crew, all women and men of color. The call sign, Unity 001. As Eli guided the plane down the runway, he looked to his right. Co-pilot Alani, now 19, wearing full uniform, cool and collected. He said into his mic, "Ready, first officer?" She replied, voice clear, "Cleared for takeoff, Captain." Mid-flight, Eli let Alani take the controls. He leaned back, watching her hands, steady, skilled, natural. He smiled. This was the future, and it was already flying. They touched down to cheers, banners, and camera flashes. But Eli didn't need the photos. He had already seen what he came for. The sky wasn't just open, it was full of voices. Back in his home, Eli opened a small drawer filled with keepsakes, his original flight log from the Air Force. The first letter he received from a student, the fake article that tried to bring him down, now marked with a red stamp. False, and the platinum wings gifted to him by the crew. He added one more item, a framed photo of Unity 001 signed by every student on board. At the bottom, Alani had written, "Because of you, we don't have to fly alone." That night, Eli opened his journal, the same one he'd carried through everything. He wrote, "I was never just trying to fly. I was trying to lift others. Today I saw them soar, and that's all the proof I'll ever need." He closed the journal, turned turned off the lamp, and looked out the window where a plane blinked across the night sky. Not his, but somehow still part of him. Years later, Alani would become one of the youngest black female captains in commercial aviation. Jordan, the boy who met Eli years earlier at the mural, would graduate from Embry-Riddle and fly internationally. And at every major airport across the U.S., there would be signs that read, "This crew is protected by the Matthews Equity Standard." Because he didn't just fight for a seat in the cockpit, he built a seatbelt for everyone else. The end.